All right. Good morning and welcome, Facebook. This is the Weekly Jargon. I'm Abel Perez.
Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And this is the Weekly Jargon. First things first, I'm going to make sure that you could actually hear us. So I'm going to turn on my speaker here. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Oh, it's on.
It's on. It's on like Donkey Kong. Well, hey, everybody, welcome. This is the Weekly Jargon. It's a show we started a few months ago, right, fellas? And just the opportunity for us to get together in this space and talk absolute jargon. So how many episodes do we have now, Jose?
I want to say we're over 30 plus episodes. We started this back in, I want to say, October of 2022. And I think over the last almost year, we've been kind of practicing our craft here at trying to deliver some good content to our viewers. So hopefully our Facebook fans can also appreciate the comments or at least the topics that we bring to you guys live.
Yeah, absolutely. So go check out our YouTube on this Facebook page, which we created this morning, by the way. So it's brand new. On this Facebook page, there is a link. You can go to our YouTube, and there's like 30 to 40 episodes where we are just talking absolute jargon. And that's kind of like life, right? When you link up with some friends or people that you've never seen before, it's like, hey, what's going on with whatever headline's going on? And you kind of just go through different wormholes, right? Now, we want to give a little disclaimer. These are our absolute opinions, right? And opinions based off of our own life experiences and, of course, our professional backgrounds. And so these opinions aren't tailored to your opinion. We're not trying to get you to really agree with us or like us, but just really putting things in a context based off of those experiences that we have on our own. And sometimes we don't even agree with each other here, right? And that's, I think, when things get really good. So you might see the gloves come off and us really go at it. But anyway, what are we talking about today? Today, we're going to talk about the nature of today's economy. But I want to back it up a few years because we had a major world event that happened, right? And that was the COVID. And so we are dealing with what we're dealing today as far as economy goes, the socialization, education, all of those things can be tied just a few years back to COVID because it had such a big impact on us, right? So what do you guys think? Is COVID to blame?
Well, it's certainly something to look at because after the years, like you mentioned, you start seeing data, you start seeing what took place after the aftermath of COVID. Mm-hmm. And I think today's podcast, we're trying to uncover what impacts did it have on our economy. And obviously, as we spoke about this briefly, but having to release all this money out to people that were off of work, so to speak, right? Either through unemployment, some type of relief, and or businesses shut down. You really couldn't do much. You couldn't visit any restaurants. You couldn't really travel. So all that stored energy, what did that do after everything reopened, right? And we saw this flood of money coming into the economy, and again creating what we see today, an inflationary environment. And how does that impact us today, right? And to this day, we're feeling it because now, obviously, for us in the business and the mortgage industry, we've seen rates go from 2.5% up to today's rates where we're looking at 7.25%, 7.5%. So how does that impact folks trying to purchase in our economy? And then again, the price of commodities, fuel, groceries, everything that you have to do. Anything that's got to do with just keeping the normal cost of living, what has that done? And Rohi, I think you guys have seen it as well in your area.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it's tough to look at some of this stuff is prior to 2020, gun industry wise, we were in a slump. I mean, into 2019, a lot of distributors and manufacturers were giving away stuff. I mean, we were pretty much in what we're thinking is coming in the future here soon, but that industry was at a loss. Nobody was really buying. There was no scare. Everybody was just kind of happy. We had Trump, whatever, and you take that to today, and through that, there, like you said, it was amazing that the minute that word stimulus was given, guys were messaging me, "This is the gun I'm buying with my money. Get me this gun ordered. Hurry up and get it." They spent it before they had the check in their hand, And it wasn't just that. It was many industries having to adapt to what COVID did. That's why you had these explosions of like DoorDash and these Instacarts and all these people that are going to go shopping for you because I don't want to leave my house. That wouldn't have happened without COVID because what do you mean? We go to the store. It's down the street. You just get in your car and you buy your groceries. Oh,
Right.
paid somebody like $20 to go get my groceries. That's crazy. But now it's like, it's commonplace. So there's a lot of that I think was good to some degree because I think it kind of, shook things a little bit and things that may have been ready to fall anyways closed up and it gave opportunity for a new way of doing business. But the stagnation and the inflation and all that, still like in our thing, gun prices have gone up, ammo prices are still twice what they were pre-COVID, and a lot of that, in my opinion, is what I think is going on in every industry, which is it's artificial. It's just artificial prices. Abel was kind of talking about like to keep maybe the profits up, even though the demand is kind of still there. Because that's one thing that the gun industry did over and over and over again is that you would see, because the rushes in our industry always correlate with an election, which is why we're waiting for this next year because there's probably going to be another rush on guns and ammo. But so you would think like knowing that, go buy all your stocks in guns and ammo because they're going to bring a huge profit next year. But they don't. They go bankrupt. And it's because they overproduce, or they typically would overproduce. Markets would, close up, and now they're stuck with all this inventory that they have to essentially just dump. And I think that's this year what's kind of happened is, whether it be cars or guns, they said, no, we're going to pull back. We're going to make 10% maybe of what we used to, and we're going to let it all sell because you as the consumer are going to go, I need a new car. I don't care what the price is. I don't care what the features are. I need a new car, and that's how they're making their money now across the board.
So you're saying they artificially inflate because of the demand, knowing the
100%.
demand, obviously, and what we've kind of experienced. And you did see that. You saw that in the car industry, right?
Crazy prices.
You couldn't get processors, or you couldn't get a part from a car.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, right? So all of a sudden, you got these Teslas going from like $35,000 down to $65,000, and nothing against Tesla or anything like that, but all vehicles, even used car vehicles, were the ticket, because now people wanted to purchase these new cars. Obviously, with COVID, the in-home work, that Zoom kind of boomed. And all these other online meeting platforms really took off, and I don't know. I mean, I think in a way, COVID did shape the behavior that we're kind of taking on today, right? Being at the city council and at a public meetings, we had to adjust our meetings to be able to accommodate for the COVID restrictions that were on there, right? Now that they've been lifted, there's still some of that residue there. Mm-hmm. So we still have to participate in some way with online meetings. Obviously, there's amendments done to the current laws and what have you, but for the most part, that kind of had an impact in the way we do business. And I'm sure it had a way, even in the mortgage industry. A lot of our processors and underwriters are now working from home. And I don't know if this was a shift already coming and COVID just really made that happen faster. Yeah. But I certainly think it took shape. But back to the original question, how did it impact our economy? I think you mentioned it already with the artificial inflation artificial inflation that we saw kind of roll over. Abel, what did you experience? I mean, obviously being in the professional world in mortgage, what do you see?
Well, I think I'm appreciating this onion here because there's so many layers to it that we could pull it back, and as each of you guys were talking, it was like, oh, I'm going to comment on that. I want to comment on this, So just to kind of reflect on, some of the comments that I heard, stored energy, right? Stored energy, Jose opened it up with that, and it was like, hey, money was going somewhere, right? Money was being saved. As soon as they got stimulus checks, it was like, I know what I want to do with it, right? Yeah. So the first question I want to ask you guys is, do you feel like too much money was pumped back into the economy? Because we know why it was pumped, right? It was we can't allow our system to fail. We can't allow people to lose work because, by the way, we're shutting down employers, right? We're saying you cannot work. We're saying that you have to have a certain amount of space, and so you have to reduce your amount of workforce, and so how do we supplement those incomes? Well, we got to pump money into the economy, right? Now, some people are saying too much money was pumped in, right? You had people who were just sitting and taking advantage of the system, right? On average, though, because everything's done on averages, and when things are done on averages, you're always going to have somebody who comes up, right? Comes up a little bit because they were at the bottom. And then you're also going to have the counter to that, right? And which is somebody, and an example I want to use is somebody like a waiter, right? Maybe they were working part-time, only making $20,000 a year, right? And that was what they made. During COVID, they were getting so much stimulus that they were making now $30,000, right? But what about the waiter that was making 60, right? Now they're only making 30 or 40. And so on average, it may appear like, well, everybody, things were good, and the majority of people that we know here locally that were working those, minimal hours may appear to have come up big time, but I think overall there was some balance there. But my point is that money was to ensure that there was that energy still being released, the same amount, and let's face it, a lot of people were able to save that. We're so confined into our homes, can't do anything, can't have any fun, right? As soon as the floodgates open, or as soon as they say, okay, we're good to go out, everybody has kind of gone crazy, right? Everybody has a little bit of money in their pocket, but most importantly, they have desire in their heart to be social again. They say, you know what, man, I didn't go to enough concerts. I'm getting out there, right? Yeah. I didn't go to enough mixers. I'm going to start doing those things, right? They're spending money, and now small businesses are starting to, reap benefits of that if they survive, to Rohi's point, right? Yeah. If they're still around to survive. And people have now just, come out. Inflation starts taking off because of that, right? We have all these consumers, all this demand and consumption being had, but now we're at a point of stagnation, right? Because it's like, well, the fun is that honeymoon is kind of over, right? Mm-hmm. Back to reality, you look at your finances, your balance sheets, and you're like, shoot, I racked up $20,000, $30,000 in credit card debt, right? I have these new accounts, these personal loans, or I pulled out an equity line, and I was having a little bit too much fun, but now I'm kind of back to like where I started pre-COVID, right? That's kind of like my overall take on like how COVID has got us to this point of inflation, battling, and now we're going to see that stagnation where people are going to start simmering down. Retailers, the Macy's, Targets, Home Depots, they're not anticipating losses, but they are not anticipating revenue growths, right? So now that's forcing those type of retailers and big corporations to find ways to be more profitable, which usually means cutting overhead, reducing labor, things of that nature, right? Because the only way you can grow profits with the same amount of revenue is by cutting expenses.
That's pretty much it. That's the bottom line. I'm glad you brought up this topic because, it's funny. If we go back into history, and this is after the depression of the 1930s, right? What was taking place then? What did the government have to do in order to stimulate the economy again? Did we spend money in the scale of what we did this past with this pandemic that we had? If you recall, back then there was a flu also prior to that. But then we had the Depression, right? And what did Franklin Roosevelt do?
Put people to work.
Obviously, try to put people to work. And he was stimulating and subsidizing certain things. Yes. I recall them saying that even with certain farms, they would actually make sure they'd slaughter certain hogs so that, again, you would create a demand for something because there was just nothing out there. Yeah. But I think the scale that took place now obviously hasn't been heard, or it's unprecedented, right? We haven't really seen something like that. At the end of the day, the amount of money that was poured in, not only through the unemployment relief, business relief, corporate relief, I mean, think about it. A lot of these folks that were in corporations, they took that money and instead of producing it and investing in it, what did they do, Rohi?
Bought Ferraris.
They bought Ferraris, but most importantly, they bought their stocks again.
Yeah.
And they what? What did they do when they bought their stocks? When they buy their stocks, they continue to inflate these prices, right? And really, what we weren't doing, and not only that, now I work as a tax preparer, right, and registered tax preparer. And when I was preparing these taxes, I noticed that obviously part of the stimulus package was that they were also receiving additional credits for the additional child tax. So not only were you getting the relief in unemployment, but you were also receiving relief with the child tax credit and then the other stimulus that they were giving you. The states participated. So there was a lot of stored money. And to your point, Abel, they weren't able to really utilize that money right there and then, right? So online shopping became something huge. And obviously Amazon was busy all over the place. Yeah. There was back orders. A lot of, there was a lot of chaos going on at the time. Now that the dust has settled, now we're going back to what we call quantitative tightening. And we're looking to take money out of the economy by increasing these interest rates, lowering the amount of credit that we extend to folks, and it's hurting people. It's hurting people because once you put them on a rush, like a sugar rush, and you want to take that away, in this case it's money, it doesn't always amount to something positive. They want to call it a soft landing. It's nothing less than, it's not a soft landing. If anything, people are going to crash. Like anything else, if you're addicted to something, too much coffee, too much alcohol, and you stop drinking it the next day, you're going to have some withdrawals to that. And that's exactly what's happening to our economy. To your point, we're not a very industry, we don't produce a lot of industry anymore. We don't make things anymore. We are based like a 70 to 80% service industry. We service people. So we don't have that sector anymore that's producing, for example, your gun parts. The shirts that we wear, the glasses that you wear, the computers, technology, all this is outsourced. So we don't have these particular jobs anymore that are creating the revenues to sustain us. We're going to become more of a dependent type of society on whatever the government says if we're not really concentrating on one of the core values that we've had here, industry. So that's a conversation I'm sure we can have later, but obviously COVID has certainly, it's really highlighted some of the deficiencies that we have here, and we're going to start feeling the effects with the stagnation for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and again, the stimulus that bothered me was, it's like you said, unemployed. I get the people that during COVID had a job and were told to sit at home for weeks or months or whatever during those shutdowns. Okay, you give them money, but then we said, okay, hey, guess what? You can't kick them out if they don't pay their rent or their mortgages. Then we said, hey, if you had student loans, you don't have to pay those. So here's all of that expense you had on a monthly budget. You don't have to spend it. You don't have to, give it away. But it didn't go to helping them at all. It went to, like you said, Amazon and all these things that they wanted to buy, that, new car, new boat, new whatever they wanted. And the stimulus was supposed to keep you alive, not inflate your lifestyle, And many of those stores were like me in the sense of when COVID hit, they cleared out inventory on everything. So we all had this, we talk about the reset. That was our reset. We were able to get rid of all this crap we couldn't sell, get rid of it, start fresh. But those industries are doing exactly what I told you, like the gun industry does, which is now because they thought this demand is going to keep going, they've had these orders that says, hey, keep this stuff coming, just keep it rolling. I don't care the price. The customer's going to pay it. And now the customers aren't paying it because, like you said, we're running out of money. There's no extra money coming in, and the orders are already made. You can't cancel those orders. And now, in a traditional world, that's where you see the word sale, because they have to get rid of it. We see it again. I don't know if my industry is the leading industry, but like I'm having online distributor or retailers selling things for less than my cost. Now, if that's not a scary thing, it should be, because that doesn't happen. Like right now, like you said, we're inflation and COVID, but yet now they're selling it at a loss because they have to, or else they're going to get piling up with all the stuff that they think they needed because it was going to keep going. So that's where I think it's going to get scary. Now, you talk about cars. Cars is one of those things that we weren't paying just full price. You were paying a premium. I don't know if you ever saw like Mercedes. Mercedes was asking for almost $100,000 over their cost if you wanted their car. Now that's ridiculous. But we went to the, now the source is telling us the reason that is because the used cars market, they have so many repoed cars that now the car dealerships and manufacturers are saying don't release them because they know the minute they do, car prices are going to basically crash, just like anything else would crash. So when you say, is it around the corner? It's around the corner, but everybody is doing everything they can because they don't want this crash. They're going to give money. They're going to, hold on as much as they can, but it's inevitable. At some point, it's going to give way and the floodgates are going to come. And I don't know.
And not to pick on the car dealers or anything like that, but the way they operate, from my understanding, is that they have vehicles on the floor that are held by a credit line that they get somewhere,
Correct.
right? So that credit line, I'm assuming it's a commercial line of credit, obviously has a rate that's fixed for a short-term amount of time. So they may have had the term for 2-3 years, but now the wake-up call is, hey, these rates have gone from here to here. And if you don't get rid of those cars, then you're default on your credit line.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously that's how you pay for that credit line is you're turning over those cars. And I'm starting to see that through the car industry, at least from what I hear, is that they're holding on to them. They're
Mm-hmm.
storing that energy that could potentially come back and backfire. Because if people really stop, the demand is not there, then you can't hold on to those cars much longer. They have to go through some discount clearance or some auction where you have to sell them. Because like you said, one thing about COVID that it did is it put a lot of people to go out and start purchasing these vehicles. And if you go through these live auctions that they have, you'll start seeing these 2019, 20, 21 Teslas really trying to sell for I'm not saying they should be the actual price, not the premium price that they sold them for, but they're selling and they're selling for a little cheaper now. Imagine how much more of those folks are holding on because there's no longer any help. Hey, I need the money. If I can't get the money from you, then you're going to go in a default, and then I have to repo the car. Now the bank's problem is to try to get rid of that car soon enough so that they can recapture their money. But again, with the amount of interest that they had on that credit line, commercial line, it's a wake-up call for them too because there is no commercial lender out there that didn't get impacted by the Feds increasing their rates.
Yeah, and that's a good point and a good reminder to all of you out there. The Fed rate didn't just affect mortgages. It was all lines of credit, all money, all cost of money. And so obviously the one that hits your pocket directly, well, auto loans, everybody needs a car, but specifically the housing market. And I think because you probably have the majority of your cheerleaders of anything finance are going to be like loan officers, realtors, and we all know at least a few of those on our social media. And so you hear about it more frequently, right? Your friends, family, everybody's, shopping around for homes, things of that nature. So you're hearing about it. But the Fed rate hikes were for all money. And so EECU specifically, 1% interest rate. Oh, I've heard of somebody with less than a 1% interest rate on an auto loan back in like 19 and 20. And that's almost sounds insane compared to now because now the norm seems to be, that 5-6% interest rate on an auto with great credit, by the way, and that's just the norm. That used to be, hey, you have bad credit, you only qualify for 5 or 6%, but here we are. And so what does that do? What does that do to your pocket at home? It increases your monthly debt to income ratio, right? So now you're making you're retaining less of your money without actually upgrading your lifestyle, right? Because you still needed the car to drive, and now that's going up. And all industries are feeling it, by the way, right? We talk about insurance industries. Insurance industries are pulling out of California because the cost of doing business is too expensive, right? It's you got to insure those policies. And so now you got homeowners insurance, auto loan insurance, life insurance, all of those monthly expenses that are just going through the roof. And I like the idea, or I like the comment about, we're not producing anything here, but the argument to that is how can you produce anything here with so many regulations and so much cost? Minimum wage is on a constant increase. Let's face it, you can make Nikes for $1 overseas. And what type of margins are you going to lose if you start making them here when it's going to cost you, $50 to make one pair?
And the point with that, the market, the manufacturing part, I know like Trump and all these guys that were pushing, we need to bring manufacturing, and Biden's trying to do the chip manufacturing here. And you think it sounds great. You think you want to have that kind of stuff here until you really look at the dirty and you say, go look at China right now. It's a toxic waste dump because that stuff produces nastiness, and you
Right.
think you want it here, and no, you don't. Go look what happened, what is it, Detroit that had, Michigan that had their water issues, because
Right.
so America has to transition out of this idea of we're going to make like those kind of things here. We have to start making something else. And we do to some degree because we design and we do all the funding to design all this crap we have in this room, and then we send it off to China and they build it. That still is a good partnership, except that now that you give all that information to China, they take it and they go, well, great, thanks for doing all the hard work, and we're going to do and make our own version of it for cheaper because we can, because we're the manufacturers.
Right.
So there has to be some of that, like, intellectual property stuff that protects us as Americans for the work that we're doing here. But to say like, oh, I want to start making those shoes here, no, you don't.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I was going to add, you brought a good point there. We're not making, but we are in a way enhancing the infrastructure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things. Again, that's through government stimulus. That's
Yeah.
money that's being produced, not necessarily from small businesses or anything like that. That's money that you'll essentially get taxed on, or your generations to get taxed on, right? Because that's what you're doing. You're investing in public works, which is great.
Yeah.
It's a socialist idea. Not too many people like that concept, but that's what it is. You're trying to provide work for folks, kind of like you did back in those 1930s. You're trying to get people to work, so that again, you can tax them, and then you can try to generate some type of revenue in our coffers. Essentially, that's the idea behind the infrastructure bill, right? That it'll enhance. Well, I mean, we need it. We definitely need it. You can see our roads, you can see our bridges, you can see all that. You definitely need it. But you can't forget about the private sector, because that's also what creates industry, right? And I'm not advocating for either or. I'm just trying to highlight why it's important for us to have that investment in our infrastructure. Now, one of the other things that we did mention because of COVID is that these interest rates, like you said, back then these banks were taking, the way banks make money is that you drop in your money and they utilize that money to reinvest it for you. Well, a lot of these banks didn't think that these rates would go up that's high. So they took that money, they invested it in long-term bonds. And guess what? People are saying, well, shit, I want my money because now they're paying me a 5% yield somewhere. And everybody rushes in there to try to grab their money. Well, guess what? The banks don't have it. And that's why they call it the banks running out of money. They're running short on funds, and you have these closures. And one of the biggest closures that we saw was Silicon Valley Bank. That happened more so because it was mainly joint venture enterprises or people with capital, a lot of capital. And these aren't your normal members of a bank, but it's similar concept. They wanted that money, you didn't have it. So what's happening now is these banks are becoming competitive now. You've said it lately that Robinhood is offering you 3 to 4%.
4.9.
So now they're attracting you and drawing out this net. Hey, let's take your money and let's put it here. But the banks that weren't wise, that didn't think about what could happen, are the ones facing trouble and are starting to close doors. And they're being consolidated, merged with other banks. They're being bought because, again, they weren't, and I'm going to say the word, they weren't really fiscally responsible in looking out for what could take place on a market like we are today. Now, the question is, do we rescue those banks? Are they too big to fail? It's like you, for example. Are you too big to fail in your business, Rohi? So if Saks went out of business, would Madeira face chaos, for example, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
we have a live example,
Yeah.
right? What about our hospital?
Yeah.
that exactly. So that
Yeah.
and that's what I'm trying to get at is that sometimes if not managed correctly, if not fiscally responsible, then why should you put it on the back of taxpayers?
Yeah.
That's my concern. It's like, I mean, don't put it on the back of us. You have to do a pretty good job. And this is why I love capitalism, because it really lets you compete with other folks, and you're going to do something better that essentially somebody's going to go obsolete. And that's it, because you don't have that demand anymore. Something that you produce is no longer in demand. Therefore, we can't continue to save something that frankly it just doesn't operate well.
Well, and that's why. So this is the part that, again, if you ever look at casinos, I'm sure you've been to a casino in the last couple of years. You can see that the majority of the floor space is now going to what? Slot machines. Why slot machines? Because they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't call off. They don't ask for overtime. They just work, and they'll suck in money, right? Where if you have a card, dealer or something like that, that's paid. No one's playing that table. They're losing money every minute that somebody's not playing at that table. So they've moved to these slot machines over the last couple of years. The food industry is right behind it. They want to make everything can and will be robotic. But what does California do? They say, okay, well, now we're going to tax you like an employee because they know there's going to be lost revenue from these people getting shifted out from flipping a burger to now they have no job. The problem with that mentality is if you look at right now, there's so many people that are unemployed, and you go, well, why are you unemployed? With this remote work, it's been commonplace. You could sit on your couch and you can be an operator for some company anywhere around the world. But I still call, like I had to call Dell the other day, and I'm still talking to somebody overseas. And you go, why isn't the United States or California doing the same thing and saying, hey, if you're going to operate overseas from this charge them something to make us more, comparable to that rate to keep Americans employed, instead of saying, well, this person can't work. Well, disability should be gone, right? Okay, so you can't walk. Can you talk? Can you push a button and answer a phone call? Can you say, hey, thanks for calling Verizon. How can I help you? Anybody can do those jobs. And again, that part is because, like you said, is taxpayers. Let's, instead of just infusing money and saying, hey, here's your free money, just stay on unemployment. Oh, we're sorry you can't find a job. There's plenty of jobs available. We're just not making them there.
I saw the jobs report, and it is true that there is plenty of jobs available, but one of the biggest complaints from employers is the quality of the workforce. Quality of the candidates available for those jobs, and it's hard to find people who are qualified for those positions, and. Yeah, you mentioned some entry level type jobs, but those aren't the type of jobs that we're talking about or they're talking about in those reports, because anybody could do those jobs, but do we want to pay them our national minimum wage when they can do it for a fraction of a price by outsourcing it, right? But skilled labor, I think we are service-based in the United States. A lot of creativity, Silicon Valley, making everything, all the great technology that we have today. Another big employer in California are unions, right? So whether you're an electrician, concrete person, those skilled laborers, those are some of the best careers that you could have, aside from the medical field and things of that nature. But it's all with your hands. It's all service based, and so if you're looking for a job, looking for work, you really have to invest in yourself, right? Warren Buffett said it best when at the start of COVID. It's like, during these times, invest in yourself. You can't work because you work at a restaurant, you work at a gym, and they're shut down. Don't sit at home and just collect your check and do nothing. Invest in yourself. Learn something. Learn a craft. Learn how to code. Learn whatever, right? Come out of this stronger so that you can obtain one of those skilled labor type jobs.
But the thing is that you have to understand, and it's a harsh word because it's some people, that's not where they're going to go, but we plugged this mentality of go to school. Like you said, better yourself. And it sounds great. Except that now you've taken this person that should be filling this entry-level job, and I don't want that job anymore. I think I'm worth more, but so I'm going to go to school, or I'm going to do whatever I got to do to get this job that I don't care how much schooling you have, you're never going to be qualified. Right. You don't even have the job mentality of going to work every day and showing up on time that you need to maintain that job. So now they're going to go through the schooling, and then what do they become unemployed. So you wasted taxpayer dollars to educate them, and then now you're wasting taxpayer dollars because they say they can't find a job in that field. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here screaming, saying, hey, I can hire you. I can give you a job. I don't want it. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll wait till this other one opens up. And that's what we see now is, and yes, everybody you're saying like that was, maybe in this like $60,000 job market pre-COVID, because of these openings went to this $100,000 job. Nobody's filling this other one anymore because nobody can.
Yeah.
So there is that gap because again, across the industry, everybody I talk to is screaming how we can't find people on every market. So when somebody is saying that I can't find people for every market, employment should be zero. There should be just completely zero unemployment, but we're not. There's still tons of people that are milking the system. So.
Well, and we haven't even touched on AI. And with AI coming, where will that put folks at, right? Because that seems to be a technology.
Some markets.
You had, for example, the robotic arm.
Yeah.
How that's replaced people in the factories and what have you, right? They're manufacturing vehicles already with all pretty much robotic arms and the technology that's out there. If anything, they're more like inspectors.
Yeah.
Because they still need a good set of eyes. But for the most part, these computers are down to like almost a perfect weld or something like that, right? And it's kind of scary that would replace a lot of these folks with that skilled labor.
But it's a consolidation. That's the thing. What we're getting to is across the board. It is a consolidation. Because yes, that robot replaced maybe 5 people, but now that robot requires basically the skill of those 5 people to maintain it. And those people that lost their job are not making that jump to say, okay, I want to take up the position to service it. Somebody else already is, and that's where, AI robotics can hurt, but that's where California is combating it. They're saying, no, we're going to charge you for that robot just as if it was the same as those 5 people because we don't want to lose jobs. So you're getting this fight again of why aren't we fully robotic against, even our entry-level jobs? Well, it's because California is prohibiting it. They don't want it.
Well, they just want to make sure that whatever void exists of taxing someone, right? That
tax
void,
is all about
because
it is.
At the end of the day, look, if you're missing money from those coffers, and obviously something has to be, removed or something's going to be hit, and to absorb that big of a hit, obviously I think would be a big impact for California. You see this also with the electrification of vehicles. Mm-hmm. There is a gas tax, right? Now, what happens with those people that don't pump gas? Who's actually paying for? And here's where I feel it's only the people, and I think that are at the poorest level that are having they're having to use a fuel at the gas, right? At the pump, and they're paying for a tax, right? They're having to pay to supplement the difference that electrification has caused. Now, I know that there's new legislation to allow a certain metric or a certain way of accounting for miles, right? Mm-hmm. Vehicles, miles traveled. So that you can account for that as well, because if you went off the grid, and you and I have talked about this, there's no way that you can be off the grid completely and not have to pay some type of service charge. And we talked about the PG&E, for example, with the solar and all there. You still have to pay something. And I think it'd be the same here with electrification. You still have to pay something. And I'm starting to hear that the cost of maintaining that electric vehicle and paying the electricity to charge here and there is starting to amount to the same price that you would pay at the gas pump. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, to charge your vehicle, you still have to stop and enter your credit card and pay for that charge, right? So, and again, these are conversations we can have. I think the point today was stagnation, right? Yeah. And maybe if we can finish off with this is what and this is, again, you talked about it, opinion, but what's your forecast in the next year? What do you see based on what we've experienced over the last 3 years?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be, stagnation's a good word. I think there's kind of, we're hitting that realization or that reality wake-up call stage right now. We've, like I said, the honeymoon's over, right? And, we've got all our jollies out there, right? We had the fun and you went out, you explored, and now it's kind of like, oh shoot, like, life is, pretty long term, and they say live like there's no tomorrow, but if you do that financially, you're gonna fail, right? And so you do got to play the long term game when you're handling your finances. And I think people are starting to realize that, man, there isn't a nice stimulus check at the end of the quarter, or coming at the end of the year. These things don't exist anymore. I can't just file for an additional unemployment if I leave my job, right? So now I got to stick this out. I have to take this job. I have to work a little bit harder. And so with all of this, and obviously I'm in the mortgage industry, so I'm also thinking about people who did buy houses, or who do have homes, prior to COVID. They've accumulated some equity, right? If you bought a house in 2020, 2021, you probably have $50,000 to $75,000 to your name on average, right, of equity. And so the first escape for people, right, after this reality check is, well, let me utilize or leverage the equity I have in my home to get back to par, right? Get myself back on track, eliminate the debt that I accumulated, and now let me take it from here, right? And that's where you're going to start seeing that's where Macy's, Target, these guys start seeing, okay, we're anticipating stagnation because of that model, right? Because of that concept, because of that idea. It's gonna slow down. People aren't going to start spending less money. They're just not going to be spending more money, because I think we're at capacity right now, especially with home prices, continuing to rise, mortgages going up. We talk about auto loans going up. Despite the purchase prices coming down, interest rates are still high on those terms, right? So debt to income is certainly playing a factor. And so I think you'll see things really starting to not flatlining, just flat from where we're at. And worst case scenario for a lot of people who don't make things flat or don't try to reduce on their spending is, once that equity on things like your home is gone, once the savings is depleted, that's when you're going to start seeing people, now really scrounging for personal loans. Hopefully their credit suffices so that they can qualify for that. And you might see a little bit more pain in that sense, right? But for right now, I think people walk away from COVID with a nice little savings, the average person, a nice little savings, and a whole lot of equity in their home. And so that's going to get them through the next, I would say, even 18 months.
I feel, again, based on what I see, that I think a lot of these people that are racking up that debt and maybe not have that home to back on are going to be starting to think of the word, bankruptcy. And I think that's where we're going to get into a bad spot, because now the banks are going to take that additional load on, and they're already stressed. I mean, they already, downgraded a bunch of banks in the last couple of days because of this, worry. So I don't want it to go that way, but I think that's kind of the reality. Is they're so up to their head and neck in debt, there is not going to be another option except to walk away from it. And again, not to use his name constantly, but Trump was very vocal about that bankruptcy was like one of the best things that this country has, to get ahead in life, and I think that's when you start seeing the commercials for that you're going to start realizing that that's what's most people's mind is, hey, I can just walk away from this, and maybe for whatever the next 7 years I'm going to take a hit on it, but I can walk away completely. Great, let me just do that. Let me have this great reset, because I'm sure many of them did not do that, and even if they did, and whatever, 08, they're past their 7-year mark, so they're about ready for another one,
Yeah. And really it's, you say 7 years, but I mean, people can recover as early as 3 years.
Yeah.
It seems like most financing, whether it be auto or mortgage, it has leniency after 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's more than enough time to reestablish your credit score. In fact, I've seen people go into bankruptcy and come out with a higher credit score because all the debt's gone.
Yeah.
Right. Very, very good point. Jose, what do you got?
Well, and it's funny because, where does the bankruptcy go?
Yeah.
Where does that money go? Who pays for that? Who's responsible? Is it just one of these here that you're like,
it's magic.
Is it magic? Just disappears? I'm sure it's accumulated and accounted for in our own government's debt.
Yeah.
And when they look at that again has a lot to do with how they look at our current dollar, for example, right? The devaluing of that dollar is what people talk about. So I still think that inflation isn't quite over. Mm-hmm. I still feel that we haven't tamed the employment yet. Obviously, you have to see unemployment at a certain level before you can start working the opposite way, is trying to get into that recessionary period where you start stimulating the economy again. But if you have a stubborn economy right now that doesn't want to yield to this inflationary environment that we're in and how these feds continue to raise these rates, then not until you break it. And if anyone recalls, in the 1980s, it took rates of up to 15% to try to do that. And early on in the 1970s, I think after we got off the gold standard, they tried to fight this inflation. And just like today, they said, well, okay, we're done. And a year after, inflation was right back up. So I think they want to learn from the mistakes in the past and saying that, I don't think we're quite done, and let's not sing victory yet. So I think the Fed still have some work to do. Obviously, I think with banks now tightening their money, it's going to be harder for you to get that loan. It's going to be harder for you to say, hey, and you're going to have to tap into that equity. And that's what's happening now. People in the real estate, that have real estate that went out and got themselves a 30-year fix at a 2 to 3%, they're not going to trade that and consolidate for a 7% deal just to consolidate their debt. Instead, what they'll do is they'll grab an equity line, because the biggest portion of that mortgage is going to be that huge amount that you owe on the home. But if you have that equity, to Abel's point, you're going to tap into that to try to live off, because our lifestyles of the way we consume some folks have taken the initiative and seen this 2-3 years ago and says, hey, we got to tanker down. We got to hunker down here a little bit and not spend as much. But for the most part, with COVID, we all went wild. We all wanted to live a certain lifestyle, and there's a lot of wants. But frankly, I think you got to step it down to your needs and live within those means, because if not, then that lifestyle cannot continue at that same rate that you're getting, especially when they're tightening down. So what do? You're going to tap into your biggest asset, and that's going to be your home. They will reach a point where your debt has gone so much that you have no choice but to consolidate. And you'll want to have another fresh start, whether it's a bankruptcy or whether you consolidate. So for us in the industry, I think we're going to see an explosion of refinances in the next 3 years, in the next 2 to 3 years, because of all that stored energy.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, the advice that I would say is this would be a good time for you to acquire your savings. Be frugal. Think wisely. If you're going to purchase that home, it's because there's a need. Come talk to Abel or myself, and we'd be more than happy. If you're looking to purchase a gun, you can always talk to Rohi, right?
Yeah.
But that's my prediction. I hope that, like you said, this stagflation, typically, we don't know how long it lasts. We saw Japan back in the 90s, and they're still going through it. I think they're starting to see some green light, but that's over 20 years.
Yeah.
Let's hope that doesn't happen to us.
Yeah.
And we can recover from this whole thing.
And I think America's always been built on debt, so it's not like it's anything new, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh my God, COVID turned us into big spenders. I think it turned a few more people into into spenders.
Sure.
So cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you're still watching, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. Remember, we have about 30 to 40 episodes on YouTube. If you want to catch some random topics there, they're all labeled accordingly. So follow the link. Aside from that, we're going to try to go live here on Facebook and YouTube once a week, typically Wednesdays or Thursday mornings. So be on the lookout for that. We'll roll out a schedule here on Facebook so that you're alerted. Most important thing there, though, is that you follow so that you can get those alerts. This is the Weekly Jargon, and we want to thank you for joining us.